talk about something that is a very difficult subject matter, and it's been torturing me for many years of my childhood life and even now in my adult life. It's called factitious personality disorder imposed on another, or also known as FDIA, and formerly known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Now, parents are biologically hardwired to protect their children from harm, and that's why Munchausen by proxy syndrome is such a chilling disease, because it's when parents who have this disorder create symptoms of illness in their children for purposes of getting attention. As a result, they do real harm to their children in order to fabricate symptoms. And moreover, children may receive unnecessary and often dangerous treatments. Therefore, they can become seriously ill and even die. I'm going to talk about one example, one famous Munchausen by proxy case, a woman named Lacey Spears, who caused her son Garnett's sickness by poisoning. She poisoned him with salt delivered through a feeding tube, and so he died in 2014 at age 5. Subsequently, Spears was found guilty of second-degree murder, and furthermore, she was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. And this is just one of many cases. Okay, what is Munchausen syndrome? Okay, now as I outline some of the details described in some of these government websites that I've been finding quite useful, and how I have connected with this material through constant states of stillness and questioning. I'm going to go over some of these conditions, as well as some emotional difficulties in dealing with this type of thing, and a little background story about my grandmother, who didn't, I don't feel got treated fairly, or was properly attended to. These are generational times that we're talking about now. I'm Generation X, so this would be, my mom would be the baby boomer generation. So we're talking generations of illness stemmed from a lot of different factors, okay? Societal factors being a big, huge part of it. And how women were treated in each generation, in each era, what needs didn't get met, and how these types of personality disorder, these types of disorders can actually develop, and most commonly developed in women, particularly between women and their female children. Munchausen syndrome, considered a behavioral or compulsive disorder, is a serious mental illness. My grandmother used to lock herself up in a shed. And she was there for many, many, many days. I don't know how many years or how many months. No one really will tell me, honestly. No one likes to talk about it in the family. But there are some bizarre stories that took place that my grandmother had experienced within the confines of her tiny little shed, and how long she was there. But individuals with this type of experience often are undergoing some severe emotional traumas and difficulties. In addition, people with the disorder are not motivated by a desire for money or other material goods. In fact, they are primarily seeking attention. Therefore, they make up sickness that gain attention of healthcare workers, law enforcement, emergency responders, friends and supporters, neighbors, and online platforms. In today's social order of things, the Diagnostic of Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders notes that this disorder is different from malingering. In cases of malingering, individuals fake illness to benefit financially, to avoid legal trouble, or for other self-protective reasons. Munchausen syndrome is named for Baron Führer von Munchausen, an 18th century German cavalry officer. The Baron was known for exaggerating his life experiences. He became famous after a collection of his tales was published. Now, today, Munchausen syndrome is also referred to as factitious disorder. Moreover, it is sometimes called Munchausen syndrome or Munchausen disease. Munchausen syndrome versus Munchausen by proxy. There are some acute differences, okay? This mental disorder can manifest in two ways. Munchausen syndrome, also called factitious disorder, imposed on self, okay? So this is something that, a person might do to themselves, in order to gain some type of attention that they're needing or can't really express in a safe way. In my grandmother's case, locking herself up in her tiny little shed, right? Because I can only assume, the type of abuse that she might have endured from my grandfather. Munchausen syndrome by proxy, also called factitious disorder imposed on others, or factitious disorder imposed on another. People with this type of syndrome fake their own physical or someone else's physical or mental issues. Okay? They do so in order to get attention, and furthermore, individuals with Munchausen sometimes falsify psychological symptoms or illness such as schizophrenia. For example, they might pretend to hallucinate or hear voices. Now, this is painful for me because I actually do experience these types of things. But these people, they are even willing to undergo painful or risky tests and operations. Again, their motive is to obtain special attention from others. But in some cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, individuals with the disorder fabricate diseases in others, usually in their children, most commonly found between a mother and daughter, and even more severely found in daughters who happen to be the only child. Now, These disorders can include failure to thrive, allergies, asthma, vomiting, diarrhea, seizures, hearing voices, and infections. Moreover, they can include cancer, chronic disease, schizophrenia, stomach problems, and other serious health conditions. Their victims can be anyone in their care, including children, elderly adults, disabled people, and pets. Mothers are most likely to receive a Munchausen syndrome by proxy diagnosis. However, fathers can also suffer from this disorder. And as a result, Munchausen by proxy is considered a form of child abuse. In fact, healthcare experts describe it as medical child abuse. Many individuals have both Munchausen syndrome and Munchausen syndrome by proxy. In fact, according to Psychiatric Times, 30 to 70% of those who falsify illness in their children also falsify illness in themselves. Many mothers with Munchausen syndrome by proxy describe inducing illness in themselves when they were just teens. Now, this I am describing now, conditions where I have seen symptoms of something similar to this in my aunt, and the struggle she has had for all of my life. I am 40 now, and these are the struggles. These are the types of things that she struggled with her husband, and constantly going in and out of the hospital, constantly going in and out of treatment, actually developing some of these illnesses, okay? Now, over a long period of time, if no attention is served, the condition only gets worse and subsides in pretty gruesome and tragic results. And it's not as common as we would like to think. However, statistics can't accurately prove, because Munchausen by proxy syndrome is a relatively rare disorder. However, in general medicine, about 1% meet the criteria for Munchausen by proxy. There are no reliable statistics, as I was saying, regarding the total number of people in the United States who suffer from this disorder. And that's because individuals with Munchausen's are likely to lie about it. They insist that their false symptoms are real. And moreover, they often seek treatment for themselves or their children at many different healthcare facilities. And therefore, the statistics are misleading. Now, the most of the victims of Munchausen syndrome by proxy are preschoolers. However, some cases have involved older teens, young adults, and even adults with some kind of disability or disorder. Both boys and girls can be victims of Munchausen by proxy syndrome. Children can also suffer from Munchausen syndrome imposed on self, but this disorder most often affects young adults. Okay, now how to spot Munchausen syndrome by proxy? Often it's difficult, okay? It's so difficult to identify people with Munchausen syndrome by proxy. In fact, healthcare workers usually do not suspect. And that's because the mother or caregiver appears to be loving, responsible, caring, hardworking, and very concerned about their child's illness or their own personal safety. However, in truth, the individual is deliberately making the child's symptoms worse. Often, people with Munchausen by proxy are healthcare workers. That's interesting. Because my mother happens to fit this criteria almost to the T. And therefore, they know how to induce particular symptoms in their children. And therefore, their doctors are unable to diagnose a specific illness. Now, caregivers with Munchausen syndrome by proxy create or exaggerate a child's symptoms in several ways. And these include lying about a child's symptoms, manipulating tests, for example, contaminating a urine sample with blood, falsifying medical records, all of which I have no knowledge of her doing. But inducing symptoms by poisoning, suffocating, psychologically manipulating, starving, injecting feces and or causing infection, or creating or inducing scenarios which causes the child to inevitably believe that they are actually experiencing something not really recognized as of yet in their own reality. So therefore the child grows up often losing or having never even known any kind of identity of themselves. In other words, their identity, the identity of self, is only that which has been projected onto them. Now, these signs of syndrome by proxy, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, parents or other caregivers with Munchausen by proxy syndrome have common traits. They may demonstrate many of these characteristics. They're either a parent or caregiver, usually a mother, often a woman between the ages of 20 and 40. However, they can go much higher than that, all the way to age 65. They might also be a healthcare professional. They act very friendly and cooperative with healthcare providers and emergency responders. They appear very concerned about their own safety and well-being, as well as their child's health. They seem to be particularly interested in and knowledgeable about medical details. They enjoy the attention of healthcare professionals and emergency responders. They're very comfortable in the hospital environment. They become very angry if doctors or law enforcement tell them that there is nothing wrong here, or there has been no crime done where the child's illness might be causing some type of severe threat to their personal safety or well-being. And they often have problems with identity and self-esteem. And they may also suffer from Munchausen syndrome on themselves and thus fake their own illness as well. Now that last part is something I have never identified my own mother with. And I can't even remember a time where she was even sick. I mean, this is true. In my entire childhood, there were very strange things I thought were not very characteristic of someone who was like everyone else. I mean, I was 5 years old when the first time I saw the movie Terminator, and I saw something very strangely similar between the cyborg, right, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I thought my mom was one of them. And I remember getting whooped by the belt because one day I snuck in her room, and I was determined to find out by conducting my own experiments. My thoughts, I don't know. I just remember being like, okay, I'm going to wait under her bed until she falls asleep, and then get out of bed and flick her eyelids to see if they would open up suddenly and I would see the red. I know, it's crazy, but this is a true thing. She woke up angry and yelling and didn't understand what I was doing, and me being an only child, and I didn't have any brothers and sisters to tell me what I was doing might be dangerous or harmful, so I had to do things weird like that. And there's so many other stories like that I've done many experiments and have gotten severely punished. Some other things that should also be known about this illness is not only how to spot it, okay, but how to fight against it, right? Now, one of the ways that this government website is suggesting, and I personally know, okay, I definitely am going to need some, probably a lifetime of cognitive therapy, in addition to possibly, the medications that I'm taking currently. And I'm not at all trying to assume the position of any kind of licensed clinical practitioner who can actually study and test and see if if this is in fact the case. But I cannot help but notice, and this is something I cannot ignore, these moments of deep meditation and silence where I am asking for the truth to awaken, to open up my eyes and see the true reality instead of the reality that has been given to me. And I arrived at this fact, and I do not believe that it is a coincidence. I mean, it cannot be. But to arrive at a Munchausen syndrome by proxy diagnosis, experts look for specific signs. Signs of Munchausen syndrome by proxy include the following. The child has a history of multiple hospitalizations, clinic visits, and doctor visits, sometimes in different cities. A strange set of symptoms that cannot be identified or understood by healthcare professionals. Parent reports that the child's symptoms are getting worse, but hospital caregivers and law enforcement don't observe this. And the symptoms always occur when the healthcare professionals are not there, and always when emergency responders are not there. The child's condition improves while in the hospital, but symptoms reoccur when they return home. Illness doesn't seem to respond to treatment. The test results are unusual or even clinically impossible and don't match the child's reported condition and symptoms. Eagerness to have additional tests and procedures done. Chemicals or other foreign substances in the child's blood, stool, or urine. New symptoms arise after a test comes back negative. Family has experienced other unusual illness or death of children in the family. Blood samples submitted by parent don't match the blood of the child, and the parents insist that the child is sick even when told otherwise, in the history of vomiting or visiting different doctors with these symptoms, or healthcare facilities. Surgical scars on the child from past interventions, and refusal or reluctance to allow healthcare professionals to talk with other family members, friends, or previous healthcare providers. Now, something, as disturbing as this, I can't help but find compassion, because having read through all of this and having read about some of the causes gives me a little bit deeper understanding as to what events may have taken place that would cause a person to develop such a syndrome. And some of these causes are as follows. The immediate cause of Munchausen syndrome is the individual's desire for attention and sympathy from doctors, nurses, emergency responders, and other healthcare professionals. In addition, individuals with this disorder may find satisfaction in deceiving people, and they think of it as some kind of important, or themselves as important and powerful, by being in the company of doctors and psychiatrists. Moreover, people with Munchausen syndrome or Munchausen by proxy also enjoy the caring and sympathy of their communities because they are at a distance. The supporters don't become suspicious in the way that family members might, and parents with Munchausen by proxy often manage to procure free gifts and trips for their sick children. The underlying causes of Munchausen's are less clear, but researchers do believe that it may involve one or more of the following: biological or genetic factors, magnetic resonance imaging or MRI scans that have detected abnormalities in the brain structure of some patients, a history of abuse or neglect as a child, a very low self-esteem or inflated self-image, difficult child relationships with parents, overwhelming feelings of guilt, thinking they need to be punished for something, frequent illness requiring hospitalization as a child. As a result, they attempt to relive the experience again and again and again because they were unable to cope with or process it. Furthermore, individuals with Munchausen's often have symptoms of other personality disorders, such as borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. Moreover, research shows that individuals with factitious disorder imposed on self often suffer from substance abuse. In addition, they have a higher likelihood of committing suicide. Now, what happens to the victims of Munchausen's by proxy? Once a parent or caregiver is charged, the child's symptoms may increase. And that's because the accused individual is attempting to prove the presence of the illness, and therefore Child Protective Services or Adult Protective Services, if the scenario is such that the caregiver is caring for an adult child with a disability. And so Adult Protective Services may need to remove the individual from the home. In some cases, the parent or caregiver denies the charges, and moreover, they may move to another location in order to continue the behavior. Hence, the child will still be in danger, and so will the adult in their care. Now, having said all of this, I hope now, with some kind of decency and humanity, all of you, emergency responders, healthcare practitioners, all who have been untrained and uneducated, who can look at me and say things like, well, how come you don't just leave? If it's so bad, why don't you just leave? You're 40 years old. You're an adult. You have no fucking idea how many times I have done that in my fucking life. You have no fucking idea how many times my personal life to experience some type of autonomy, to experience some type of independence has been taken from me by this individual. You have no fucking clue. Before you ever dare fucking say that shit to me again, what you should be asking, okay, is how are you coping with this? How are you living with the fact that every time you get back up on your feet, you keep getting knocked the fuck down? How are you coping with the fact that there is no help in this department? How are you coping with the fact that you've even resorted to fucking living out on the street, where I had to experience being gang raped and mugged and beaten and left for dead in front of the hospital in Dallas, when I tried so hard to tell somebody? Nobody gave a flying fuck. None of you. Nobody fucking cared. So before you ask me that stupid ass fucking question again, I will ask you, have you heard my podcast yet?